we just talk about what human trafficking and sex trafficking is? Because it seems like a lot of people don't know. So I'm going to break that down in this video. For those that haven't been here before, I'm Brooke and I live in my car full time. I'm escaping a 20-year abusive trafficking situation. My abuser was in his late 50s and I was 17 when he initially, in my opinion, kidnapped me. And I want to talk about how these men do this in this video. So let's just start with what human trafficking is. Human trafficking is the second largest criminal enterprise in the world with an estimated industry of $150 billion. The victims transcends age, race, and various social classes, and the perpetrators are driven by profit, preying upon marginalized individuals while employing exploitation and coercion. In 2016, there were approximately 40 million people in modern slavery, forced labor, or sex trafficking. It is estimated that 72% were women and girls. So the majority of women in sex trafficking, women that are being trafficked, they are actually victims of early childhood abuse. And we'll talk about that in a minute. In the United States, approximately 100,000 to 150,000 women and children are being involved in sex trafficking. However, the covert criminal nature of traffickers and their hidden networks make it difficult to provide an accurate total number of victims. Now, I know my trafficker, he had been trafficking women for a period of like 30 years. So there's no telling how many women were impacted by him owning an escort service. And once again, local law enforcement knew about this and they did nothing about it. I love how this article pointed out that marginalized people are what marginalized individuals is what these type of men go after. They're weak men. So they're going to go after women who have been previously abused, women who grew up in poverty, women that struggle with low self-worth, women that struggle with low self-respect. They're weak men, so they're going to go after women who appear weak. And I'm not saying by any means if you've been through any of what I just listed, that makes you a weak person. However, if you've been abused in childhood and you don't even recognize the trauma that you've been through, you're not in a healthy place as it is. The exploitation of vulnerable populations forced into the sex trade has been public concern in the United States since the early 20th century. In 1910, the U.S. Congress passed legislation classifying the transportation of women across state lines for debauchery, prostitution, or any other immoral purpose as a federal crime. Now, I've talked about this before, how I was actually underage when I was transported across state lines. In the 1990s, issues once exclusively associated with prostitution were repositioned as being related to sex trafficking. The hard work of an advocacy groups and programs over the years eventually paid off with the passing of Federal Trafficking Victims Protection Act, the TVPA of 2000. And that's around the time I met my abuser in 2004, and then 2005 and 6. Y'all, we're going to go look through paperwork one day. I have a big box of stuff that we can go through and look at all of the dates on pictures and stuff. The exploitation of, the TVPA defines federal sex trafficking as a commercial sex act induced by force, fraud, or coercion. The TVPA also specifies that any minor exploited for sex, regardless of whether coercion took place, is a victim of sex trafficking. Children cannot consent to having sex with adults. They can't. So any child that has to have sex traffickers exploits the fear and suffering of another person, especially a youth. Once again, these men are going to go after people who are already in a bad position. They actually seek people out who are already in a bad position. The ability to flip the emotional switch of fear allows traffickers to coerce, control, and manipulate their victims. All humans are equipped with the same complex psychological components and this rain is messing me up. I can't hear myself think. Biological drives. In situations that elicit fear, one enters an involuntary state of flight or flight. We've talked about this before. Caused by the autonomic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system serves as a natural defense mechanism, helping people survive perceived dangers in fearful situations. In the case of most trafficked youth, their lives are a series of fearful situations. Their experiences are very traumatizing and carry lifelong negative consequences. An expert in the field of sex trafficking and relationship violence told a summit assembly in Hayes on Monday that addressing child abuse is needed to deal with sex trafficking. That's what I say. You know, the majority of people that fall into traffickers' hands were already previously abused in childhood, and these things go hand in hand. If we can start on the home front, teaching people how to raise their children, put home economics and classes that relate to traditionalism and traditional family units, the healthy stuff, if we can get that back in schools, then we can start working on abuse in the home and early childhood development, and we can teach people what not to do. You are twice as likely to be sex trafficked if you got abused as a child. That speaks for itself. We have to stop the abuse in the home, and we have to stop these people at the doorstep. Let's see here. Most victims of sex trafficking, sex traffickers, and sex buyers were abused as children. Hallie has worked in the field since 1986. She taught social work at the Pittsburgh State University for a decade before becoming the state's Victims' Rights Coordinator and directing the Victims Services Division of Kansas. Quote, "It is important that we prioritize funds and really give attention to stopping child abuse," end quote. As long as the child abuse is going on, these problems will continue to happen. 70 to 90% of people who are commercially sexually exploited have a history of childhood sexual abuse. This includes 90% of strippers as well. 90% of strippers that are strippers were abused in childhood. They go hand in hand, apparently. Quote, "They should be handing out thank you cards to their uncle, to their mother, to their father, to whomever sexually abused them, because you wouldn't be watching them on stage had that person not sexually abused them," end quote. This is from the psychologist. That's wild. Hallie said victims of sexual abuse may see the sex trade as their least bad option. Victims of the sex trade may have children to feed and a criminal history, and selling themselves for sex might be the only thing that they can think of that pays that kind of money given their circumstances. Absolutely. And this is why I say that we put these people back on the streets with no education. They're marked as a felon. What do you think they're going to go do when they can't find a job? $40,000 later, 300 and something damn interviews, about 350 now. I've been doing interviews this morning. What do you want me to do? And this is why I walk into a restaurant and they think that I would be willing to do that. because I'm already living out of my car. And they're like, oh, she will. She used to be a stripper. Of course she'll do this. No. Are you that dumb? I'm living out of a car because I refuse to. I refuse to sell my soul. Victim of the sex trade. Okay, we just read that. Quote, as far as those who are already caught up in it, I think that we need to have an effective intervention services for those who have already been victims, and intervention services for those who are buyers and those who are traffickers. I absolutely agree. We should absolutely confront these traffickers and the buyers of sex. Why are we putting them in jail for a short Putting them in jail for a short amount of time is not going to resolve the issue. I disagree. My sex trafficker was busted for prostitution, and they let him off. They let him off. Maybe if he would have caught criminal charges and actually went to jail, he would have never opened an escort service. Just a thought. He went to jail, but they let him off. The number of trafficking cases per year in options, domestic and sexual violence services coverage area in Northwest is usually less than 10 per year, said Megan. Complex trauma as a child, which is often called adverse childhood experiences, or ACES, is a predator of people becoming victims of sex trafficking. Of the 10 AECs, 44% of women who were sex trafficked had 4 to 7 of these traumatic experiences in their childhood. How many did I read off earlier? 5 or 6, and that's just the ones that I remembered on the spot. That's crazy. 44% of women who were sex trafficked had 4 to 7 of these traumatic experiences. Sexual assault, molestation, that's crazy. If a person has an ACE score of 6 or more, their life expectancy is 20 years shorter than the general public. So once again, getting sexually molested by my father, getting sexually molested by the guy from church, the camp counselor, my biological father, my older brother, I forgot about that one. That's 6 right there, just off the top of my head. Those 6 experiences could shorten my life by 20 years. And I'm going to tell you how. People, places, and things. Drugs, institutions, and death. Because these girls are getting assaulted. Then they're getting trafficked. They don't know how to get out. So they turn to drugs to deal with the abuse that they're going through. And before you know it, they're dead. Or in prison for the rest of their life. And I absolutely am a walking miracle. In the background of human trafficking, we have child abuse. We've got sexual abuse, and we've got domestic violence. Really, most victims of human trafficking that I've worked with and talked with have at least one of those in their background. If we're really going to get rid of human trafficking, we've got to get rid of those 3. As long as we have those 3 going on, we're going to have victims that are vulnerable to get involved with some kind of sex trafficking. 80% of traffickers were physically abused in childhood, and 76% were sexually abused as children. 88% of human traffickers also experience domestic violence in the home, and this is so interesting. Why? Because my trafficker grew up with an alcoholic father who beat him. So this is on point. It's on point. 84% witnessed substance abuse in their homes as children. 84% of traffickers. It's really easy to denounce them and call them pure evil. It's oh, nope, we ain't defending nobody now. They are. They're evil just because, once again, just because someone hurts you does not give you the right to go out here and hurt someone else. That's not how life works. So let's talk about what percentage of sex workers are actually coerced and forced into sex trafficking. It says, what percentage of sex workers are coerced? Prostitution is not just another job. 40% were coerced into commercialized sex trade. Women involved in street prostitution are 60 to 100 times more likely to be murdered than non-prostituted females. 60 to 100 times more likely to be murdered than women who are not prostituting. That statistic should be enough for you to know better than to walk down the road. That breaks my heart. I mean, it's almost indefinite that you're going to be killed by a perpetrator if you're a streetwalker. That's what that's saying. 60 to 100%. The U.S. Department of The U.S. Department of State estimates that between 15,000 and 50,000 women and girls are trafficked in the United States each year for sexual slavery. However, the exact number is difficult to research and may vary widely. For example, a Department of Health and Human Services study estimated the number between 240 and 325,000, while a University of Pennsylvania report puts it at between 100 and 300,000. That is a huge gap. 100 and 300,000. Y'all need to do some more studying. Of course, they're not going to spend resources finding out about poor hookers, right? According to the National Human Trafficking Resource Center, 85% of sex trafficking victims reported in the United States between 2007 and 2012 were women. In 2019, the National Human Trafficking Hotline received 11,500 cases of human trafficking involving over 22,000 victims and survivors. In 2021, the hotline reported 10,000 situations and 16,000 additional victims. Factors that contribute to vulnerability to sex trafficking include discrimination against migrants, minority groups, irregular migration, organized crime. Oh, I get it. If you don't have a driver's license or a passport, you can't find a job. So that's what that means. That's why I'm seeing so many people from down south in the strip clubs. Large amounts. We used to have maybe 2-3, Hispanic girls or, one Cuban girl. But now it's, when I go into these clubs, I'm usually the minority. Like, I'm usually the only white person in there now. So this is making sense with the immigration. They have to work somewhere. Organized crime, poverty, and runaway youth. This is huge for me because poverty and runaway youth are two of the things that I constantly talk about on a daily basis that led me into the arms of my abuser. I was a runaway and I was in poverty and I was running away from my parents' abuse and fell into the worst set of hands that I ever could. Sex trafficking in the United States is estimated between 15. That's not true. That's what we just read. Sorry. I don't believe that. I think that it's hundreds of thousands of people. Like the University of Pennsylvania said, they think that it's 100 to 300,000. I think it's about 500,000 women. That's just my belief because of what I've been exposed to. I've met these women. I know these women. I've worked extensively with these women for 20 years. What is human trafficking? Human trafficking involves the use of force, fraud, or coercion to obtain some type of labor or commercial sex act. Now, human trafficking and sex trafficking are two different things. However, you can be trafficked as a human, forced to work, forced to, be a slave for someone. So that's a popular thing too. But we're talking about sex trafficking in this. It happens in any community, and victims can be any age. Traffickers might use the following methods to lure victims into trafficking situations: violence, manipulation, false promises of well-paid jobs, romantic relationships. Traffickers look for people who are easy targets for a variety of reasons, including psychological or emotional vulnerability, economic hardships, lack of social safety nets, natural disasters, political instability. The trauma caused by traffickers can be so great that many may not identify themselves as victims. I tried to leave when I was 18. I tried to hurt myself and go to the hospital, and I told them, and they took me back to my trafficker. That was the first time I tried to get away from this person, and I didn't try to leave again until, I don't know. I tried to leave one other time in 2012 or 2013. But after being took back at 18, for about 8 or 10 years, I didn't look at myself as a victim. I was so brainwashed and felt so reliant on this person, and I'd been force-fed from the tablecloth that they were my family and they were my friend and they wanted the best for me, I had never stepped back and said, hey, wait a second, this person got me on drugs. This person gave me money for drugs. This person, has done all of these things to me. Yeah, so them saying the trauma caused by traffickers can be so great that they may not even identify themselves as victims or ask for help. I've been through that because I didn't even see it at the time. Many myths and misconceptions exist. Recognizing key indicators of human trafficking is the first step in identifying victims and can help save a life. Not all indicators listed are present in every human trafficking situation, and the presence or absence of any of the indicators is not necessarily proof of human trafficking. The safety of the public as well as the victim is important. Do not attempt to confront a suspected trafficker directly or alert a victim to any suspicion. It's up to law enforcement to investigate. And here's the thing, the last time I tried to talk to law enforcement, they sent me back to my trafficker's house. So when you're in a small city and this shit's going on, sex trafficking encompasses a range of activities that involve force, fraud, coercion to compel another person to engage in a sex act or cause a child to engage in a commercial sex act. The crime of sex trafficking is also understood acts, means, and purpose framework. These three elements are required to establish the sex trafficking crime. The acts element of sex trafficking is met when a trafficker recruits, harbors, transports, provides, obtains, patronizes, or solicits another person to engage in a commercial sex act. All of that was in my face at 17 years old. The means element of sex trafficking occurs when a trafficker uses force, fraud, coercion. Coercion in the case of sex trafficking includes the broad array of means included in the forced labor definition. These can include threats of serious harm, psychological harm, reputational harm, and I'm probably reputational. That's like kind of like blackmail. I can't say it though. Threats to others and debt manipulation. We're going to talk about this debt manipulation in a minute because I've talked about a debt trap before, and apparently debt trap and debt manipulation are the same thing, and I didn't even realize it. One applies to dancing, one applies to sex trafficking, but it's the same concept. The purpose element is a commercial sex act. Sex trafficking can take place in a private home, massage parlors, hotels, brothels, cars, any location, as well as on the internet. Debt bondage. Debt bondage is focused on human trafficking crimes in which the trafficker's primary means of coercion is debt manipulation. Once again, my abuser would give me a car and he'd say, you're going to do this, 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 and this, and if you don't, I'm going to take that car and leave you homeless. And that is debt bondage. Not only that, that is codependency. U.S. law prohibits predators from using debts as part of their scheme, plan, or pattern to compel a person to work or engage in a commercial sex act. Whether it's money, car, food, housing, whatever, drugs, debt bondage can be done with all of these things. Traffickers target some individuals with an initial debt assumed willing as a condition of future employment, while in certain countries, traffickers tell individuals they inherited a debt from relatives. Traffickers can also manipulate debts after the economic relationship begins by withholding earnings or forcing the victim to assume debts for the expenses like food, housing, or transportation, which I just said. They can also, I'm so glad to find this in writing because it helps, it's just helping me. They can also manipulate debts a victim owes to other people. When traffickers use debts as a means to compel labor or commercial sex acts, they have committed a crime. Like, I already knew that he was breaking the law because I'd already found the statute with drugs and this. So I already, knew that. But, like, I knew that a debt trap it's the same thing. A debt trap is where, like, someone comes to you and says, oh, here's a large sum of money. I see that you need money. If you had money, then you could fix this, this, and this. So they'll come to you and they'll say, here's some money. And then a year down the road, they say, oh, well, remember when I give you that money? You never paid me back from that, so I'm going to need to sleep with you 10 times to pay off that debt. That is trafficking. That is illegal as shit. And it's sad that I even have to say this. You cannot blackmail somebody into having sex with you. And, I was at the age where I didn't even have a choice. Even if I said no, I was going to get whatever I was going to get. It's awful to think about all of the women that grew up in child abuse situations in the home, and then their adult lives turn into the same thing. It's just heartbreaking for me. And I can see now in my newfound awareness and sobriety that everything, all of the dominoes have been stacked up against me. You know what I mean? My whole childhood. And I'm so grateful for the therapist that I have. I'm so grateful for my new Suboxone doctor. I'm so grateful for the people that I have helping me through all of this and reminding me that it's not my fault. And no one's going to convince me that it is. Let's talk about how to escape it. Because that's the hard part. And like I've told you guys before, these sex traffickers will come into your life and they will absolutely give you the tools that you need to fuck up your own life. Think about an isolated kid who's never had money before, and then you come into this kid's life, you throw money in their face, you give them a car, you give them firearms when they're not even legal enough to have one, and you send them out to hang with their friends. There are dozens of other women that have been in my shoes with the same trafficker that I had, and they are living proof that he has a system and an MO. Beware of vulnerabilities. Traffickers often prey on people with vulnerabilities such as poverty, homelessness, or a history of abuse or neglect. Once again, what did we read? 90% of strippers were abused as a child. 90%. Trust your judgment. If you feel like you're in danger or a situation is suspicious, let a trusted friend or relative know. You can also set up safety words with them. Keep your documents safe. This is so important. I've had my abuser take my documents, my social security card, my passport, my driver's license, all of those things, and he held on to them so that I couldn't leave. And here's my thing. I'm hyper vigilant about this stuff now. I don't leave my stuff around anyone. My stuff is always under lock and key because I've learned my lessons, and this is probably why I'm paranoid. But it's okay. I would rather be paranoid and be a U.S. citizen than not be paranoid and not be a U.S. citizen, Because guess what I'm looking for? What the frick? Anyways, but there it is. Oh, it died. Damn, it's been in here for a year and a half. I'm surprised it's still working. I don't leave my car keys, any of my paperwork, any of that around anybody. Keep your important documents and identification safe. Be careful online. Set strict privacy settings. I just found out how to do that. Be wary of strange friend requests and don't overshare. Once again, we had that guy hunt me down off the internet last week. Some red flags that could indicate a potential trafficking situation include living with your employer. Once again, the restaurant that I got hired at, these girls are waitresses and bartenders living in their employer's apartment complex. That's not normal. That is the perfect situation for a sex trafficker. You have all of these young girls working at your restaurant, living in your apartments. It's horrible. Okay, some red flags could indicate a potential trafficking situation. Living with your employer, poor living conditions, or being unable to speak to someone alone. I've been through that before too. It sucks that I Googled that and it doesn't even help. It doesn't even... It's all how to prevent it, but how do you get out of it? I can tell you what I did. I started putting things in my name. First of all, I bought a new truck. I put it in my name immediately. I also started collecting my documents. The first thing I did was go and get a new passport card, got that expedited. I started preparing. Like, I knew that after he attacked me and physically beat me back in October, I knew that, and I called the cops and they said that they would take me to jail because I'm the one with the record. I knew that I was going to have to get my ducks in a row. And I started moving things and preparing. I talked to an attorney. I stopped staying at my house as much so that I wouldn't be like around him. And I started trying to evict him off my property. But apparently they didn't want to listen to me because nothing was in my name. The house and the extra truck, it wasn't in my name. So he evicted me out of my own house, which is fine. I would much rather be away from him than have to deal with him. And he's preyed on the fact that I don't have any family and friends for a long time. I mean, that's the whole way that he was able to contact me the way that he was. There's literally, when you Google, this is why I started a channel. I Googled how to get out of sex trafficking. I put how to escape sex trafficking. It gave me nothing. Then I said how to get out of sex trafficking, and it's still giving me nothing. 20 ways you can help fight human trafficking. How to avoid being a victim. 10 things you can do to help stop human... No, I want to know how to get the fuck out of it, lady. Google, is it a man or a woman? We're going to name her Lady. I hate Google so bad, we're going to name her Karen. I want to know how to get out of it. This is what I'm talking about. It's not talked about enough. It's really sad. I guess there's a helpline. When I went to get help, they didn't help me. Matter of fact, the Department of Social Services probably should, I don't know, hire somebody, subcontract people to help women that are coming in who are escaping horrible abusive situations, because the assistance that I got, those people don't even need to be working in the field of DV, domestic violence. So now we're going to talk about human trafficking and drugs and how they go hand in hand. In early 2014, a Florida federal judge ruled that several women had been coerced into sex trafficking using illegal prescription drugs. Their trafficker, sentenced to 34 years in prison, gave and then withheld the drug to exploit their withdrawal symptoms. This is what I lived through for 17 years. Every day. Even when I was with my boyfriend, he did the same shit. The conviction set a new record in human trafficking cases. I can't say it. Precedent, as coercion had historically required physical violence. It also increased attention toward the complex relationships between human trafficking and substance abuse. This case is not an isolated example. Global reports indicate an increasing number of people coerced into sex or labor trafficking by traffickers exploiting their existing substance abuse disorder or introducing drugs to control them. I'm happy to find this stuff. When I start reading this stuff, I've never read it, and I knew it's. When you know something but you've never seen it in writing, it's so frustrating. It's like, I know this has to be true. Just like I said that the majority of sex workers were abused in childhood, and then we read that they were. You know, the majority. 90% of strippers were abused in childhood. So it's like I know things, but I've never read it, and I don't know it for sure. So to see it and confirm it and feel it, it's part of the healing process for me. To know that I'm not alone, that I wasn't the only one. Even though I know that he did it to multiple women before he met me. So it's still nice to see it in writing. Incident reports into the National Human Trafficking Hotline from January of 2015 through January of 2017 found that 22 individuals who had potentially experienced human trafficking reported induced or exploited drug use as how their trafficker controlled them. So what they do is they introduce you to drugs, they get you strung out, and then they say, hey, by the way, I need you to go do this for me. And if you don't, or I need you to fuck me, like my abuser, I need you to do this or else. So fucked up. A 2012 study surveying 107 individuals who experienced human trafficking describes a similar overlap, with 84% of participants saying that they used alcohol, drugs, or a combination during their trafficking experience, often as a coping mechanism, and 27.9% reported substance use was forced by their trafficker. There should have been a comma there. More recent studies have examined substance use treatments needs of youth experiencing sex trafficking, intersections between human trafficking and the opioid epidemic, and trauma-informed treatment and other treatment of substance use disorders among trafficking survivors. Wow, what a mouthful. So they're saying that the opioid epidemic had a huge part in human trafficking. And there's intersections between the two. They meet. They're at a crossroads. They go hand in hand. As these examples show, people at risk for currently experiencing and who have experienced human trafficking may also experience substance use and co-occurring disorders that impact themselves, their families, and their community. Those co-occurring disorders, we just talked about those. PTSD, CPTSD, and borderline personality disorder. Traffickers may focus and recruit individuals with a history of or existing substance abuse disorders. This allows traffickers to induce or exploit substance use, using it as a reward or punishment to maintain control and power. Individuals may also develop a substance use disorder during or after their trafficking situation as a coping mechanism to alleviate ongoing trauma, which in turn may make them vulnerable to further exploitation. As I'm reading this, it's blowing my mind because I went to Chapel Hill back last year and I told them that I was going through betrayal trauma and all of this stuff, that this man was trying to coerce me into sleeping with him. Y'all remember they tried to put me on Xanax, something I don't need. And I'm reading this, and it's saying that providers need to focus on the substance and how these things go hand in hand. But this hospital, who is supposed to be the best in the state, has probably never even read this. Now, this is from the National Human Trafficking Hotline. Stigma, stereotypes, or implicit biases associated with substance use can prevent healthcare, behavioral care, and other service providers from identifying and treating individuals at the nexus of human trafficking and substance use. You think? Providers may focus on substance use disorders while ignoring signs or risk factors for human trafficking, and patients may not seek help or self-identify due to shame. Organizations can train staff to deliver trauma-informed, patient-centered, and culturally and linguistically, I'm not saying that, appropriate care to help ensure individuals are identified and receive appropriate support. Well, they don't do that at Chapel Hill, let me tell you. Or at Daymark. It's unbelievable how many professionals are unqualified nowadays. I'm not even qualified in the slightest, and I get all of this. I get it. I can see it. And these are people that went to school for this and don't know how. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, these people, once again, CPS, DSS, Child Protective Services, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, HHS, offers several resources to strengthen awareness, training, and screening. The ACF's Office on Trafficking in Persons offers virtual on-demand trainings that prepare professionals in various settings to identify and respond appropriately to individuals. Here's the thing. I remember when I went in to report my abuser this past time, back in September of last year. I remember the lady saying, well, you seem angry. I guess my condescending, attitude, I'm aware, I'm self-aware. I guess my condescending demeanor and my outspokenness and my craziness doesn't scream victim, okay? First of all, when you've been in a situation like that for 20 years, there's going to come a point where you start to get angry, and you're going to have to use that that anger as fuel to get you the hell out of there. That's when you know that you are good to go, baby. When you start to get angry, you're ready. You're ready to leave the nest. You're ready to leave that situation. So yes, excuse me for not acting all, like, not all victims are the same. Not all victims are the same. And I've always been outspoken. I told my abuser that he was abusing me on a daily basis. I said, it's wrong to sleep with teenagers, right? I told him every day. And he knew everything I was saying was true. And if he doesn't, it's probably because he's sick in the head. But then, once again, what type of 50-something-year-old man even wants to mess with a 17, 16, 19, 20, 25-year-old child? It's not normal. They do not train these professionals enough, in my opinion. The majority of society doesn't even know what sex trafficking is. They don't know what human trafficking is. They don't know the difference between human trafficking and sex trafficking. Human trafficking is the recruitment, transportation, transfer, harboring, or receipt of people through force fraud, or deception with the aim of exploiting them for profit. Now, this could be in the labor market. This could be in some form of sex work. This can be multiple things. Men, women, and children of all ages from all backgrounds can become victims of this crime, which occurs in every region of the world. Now, that's human trafficking. I'll read you the definition of sex trafficking. Sex trafficking encompasses the range of activities involved when a trafficker uses force, fraud, or coercion to compel another person to engage in a commercial sex act or causes a child to engage in a commercial sex act. So when these people come into your life and they say, oh, here's a little bit of money in a car, just remember that they're not going to ask for a favor immediately. They're not going to demand that you do what they want you to do immediately. They're going to break you down slowly. They are going to make you feel like you can only ever rely on them. And then they're going to throw you to the fucking wolves. And I just hope that if any of y'all are going through this, any of my girlfriends that are still in the sex work industry, whether it's a strip club or whatever, I just want y'all to know that y'all are so much more than what you have been through. This does not define you. You are not going through this alone. There are millions of us out here that have been exploited due to the fact that we grew up poor because we didn't grow up with good parents. Ain't it really sad that we get hit with a double whammy because our parents were crappy? It's not your fault, though, whatsoever. And don't let anyone make you think otherwise. And if you are the type of man that thinks that it is okay for you to sleep with a woman just because you fucking paid her whatever, I don't care if it was a hot meal or hundreds of dollars, you are a sick pervert. You need a therapist. That is not normal. That is not okay. That is not what God wanted for women and men. Period. You are the problem. But I love you guys, and we will talk about Kamala Harris later in the week. Probably beginning of next week. I'm taking off tonight, and we'll talk about her career and what she's done for us in the past 4 years. Because to my knowledge, she was actually hated up until like Monday. Ain't that weird? Don't believe it. Don't believe the polls. She is not winning. We're going to come together. We just got to show up and vote. So Trump 2024, I love you guys. Pray for me because God knows I need it, and I'm praying for y'all, and we will talk on the next one. Bye, y'all.